Hello, everybody. I think I'm going to wait until 5:33 and then I'll get started. Okay, I think I'm ready to get going here. So earlier in the week, we've been talking about headers, different sort of metadata you can include in requests. We're going to kind of continue that theme today, but along a little bit of a different track. Today we're going to talk about a technology called JSON, and it's probably something you've heard, a term you've heard thrown around. And I'm going to kind of explain it through a sort of problem that you might run into if you're making an HTTP request. So here's sort of the problem. We want to make a request to some sort of fictitious endpoint like get/users. In response, we want to get a list of users. But in order to do that, somehow the server needs to encode that list of users in the body. Like we need to have a format that the server can like send that information. So far in this class, we've just been sending kind of plain text, like sort of English, or we haven't really been sending like machine readable data. And we can't really do that if we want a machine to like be able to understand the data in the body and like parse it and extract out like bits of information about the user. So in this example, like maybe a user's got like a name, it's got like a type, it's either a student or a teacher, it's got an address, a city, and a state. So it's got all this metadata. It's not just like plain text, and we need to have some sort of structured way we can store it. So any ideas? Anybody have any suggestions on maybe how we could store these users?
In arrays?
Go ahead.
In arrays?
Yeah, sort of.
They're objects and they can, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of what we
Tell
want.
Max I said that. He'll be happy.
Say that again. Sorry, I missed the last part you
I
said.
said, tell Max I said that he'll be happy that I actually learned that after all this time. So.
Yeah, I mean, you're not too far off. We want to somehow like store a list of users. We need to return a list of items. And then each of those lists of items needs to have like a bunch of parameters. Like it needs to have a bunch of like options. So we kind of need like a protocol to do that. We need like a protocol we can use to serialize this information, to turn it into a text string that we can send from one system to another. And that protocol needs to be machine readable. And ideally, it's also human readable too. Like it'd be good for humans to be able to understand this information. So I just kind of came up with like a fake sort of protocol, like a protocol you could use to do this. So maybe one thing you could do is you could take all your fields, you could separate them with like dashes or to separate them with some sort of character. And then between each of those user kind of sections, you could put maybe like a semicolon or some sort of other character. So for example, like maybe you have like user one here, you've got Ryan, you've got a teacher, an address, you've got Susie John, who's a student. And maybe you could store that kind of like this, where you've got like the name, you've got teacher, the type, got the address, and like this is the first user here, and there's a semicolon, and here's a second user. And this would work, and I will say I've definitely written, I've encoded things like this in the past when I've kind of needed something quick and dirty, but there are kind of some problems with this. But you see, does it make sense how you could send this in an HTTP request and you could write some code to decode this and understand this sort of format? Like it's machine parsable. Like a program could read through each of those sections and could do something like call split on a string to understand what that says. So what are kind of the downsides to this? Well, oh, here we go. Reading the format. Yeah, this is what I was trying to say. So, for example, if we had this sort of format, we could split based on a semicolon. We could loop through each of the resulting users, and we could split based on a dash and then print out each of the parts. So let me take this over here and run this code. And you can see, kind of get roughly what you expect, like name, type, address, city, state, same thing for the second user. So that works out pretty well. But so this works fine, but there's some, if you add some more complexity, this can start to break down. So something that often happens in web applications or web systems is they kind of move fast, and people say, well, we need to add a new field. We need to add new information to this user. For example, maybe we need to add like a zip code. So no big deal. We can add a zip code. We can stick the zip code on the end, still dash separated. Everything's great. Cool. Okay. No big deal. It seems to work. And our sort of example here also kind of seems to work. We've got our new data with our zip code in it. It's all kind of semicolon separated. You can split on the semicolon, split on the dash again. Got our new line here. So this red line is the only line that's changed since the last example. But if I take this and I run it, this also kind of seems to work. We've got same information. We've got our zip code. Yeah, everything's great. Okay, so this protocol seems to fulfill this complication fine. But what, okay, here's maybe another issue. We need to remove a field. So we decide, you know, for our application, it doesn't really make sense to keep track of whether users are teachers or students. Like, it's just not a big deal anymore. So we get rid of this field, which, I mean, no big deal. We just get rid of it in the middle here. And we update our unpacking code. We get rid of this type section here. And then this used to be like 2, 3, 4, 5. And we just, I updated it so that this was, I basically subtracted one from each of these because now the indexes have slid over one. So no big deal. This code still works. So you're probably thinking like, okay, what's the problem with this? I mean, this seems like a fine encoding method. Well, here's where it kind of becomes a bigger deal. One has an old version of the encoding code, but a new version of the format. This is when things can start to get complicated. So maybe I wrote a web application that's receiving, that I expect to receive like the initial version of the format that doesn't have a zip code even. And now I'm receiving data that has a zip code, doesn't have a user type anymore. So it doesn't have the student or the teacher bit anymore. That starts to get a little bit more complicated here. So this is the new format. See, it's got the zip code in it. It doesn't have the user type in there. And I'm using the old decoding code. I've got the type and I've got no zip field. So you could probably guess what happens. Like, this starts to get weird. Like, the type is an address. The address is the city. The state is the, like, this is kind of hard to understand. And if you got data like this, you'd probably be like, okay, what the heck's going on? And it would take you a bunch of time to kind of diagnose the issue and work through it step by step. And it's doable. Like, you could be able to figure out what's going on and fix your code, but this could cause like an issue for a user. Like, this could cause downtime for an application. In general, solutions like this where they can have consequences when you update the protocol later on, that's usually a bad thing. It's usually something that people tend to avoid. So, okay, that's one problem. Does this sort of problem make sense to people? Cool, I see one thumbs up. Unless I see anybody say no, I'm going to keep moving here. Okay. Cool. So that's not so good. Here's another problem. And you might have kind of seen this coming, but what if you have a name with a dash in it? So because I'm a Star Trek fan, I had to pick Jean-Luc Picard. But see the issue? If you don't, let me show you the issue here. What's going to happen is it's going to split on the dash in the name, and now everything's going to be offset by 1 because of that too. So like this is also kind of brittle because you basically have to guarantee that this character and this character are never going to be in any of these fields. And that's kind of a hard guarantee to make. Like names are weird, especially when these are user inputs. Like they can be whatever a user wants. So that's a really hard guarantee to make and be sure about. I mean, this could be fine for like maybe some sort of quick like hackathon project or something, but for like real durable applications, you can't rely on like names being formatted correctly or users following rules. So that's also not good. So how do we get around these problems? Well, you can probably guess JSON is a solution. So JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. And it's one of many solutions we could use to solve this problem. But these days, it's kind of the most popular. If anyone's been in kind of the web space before, maybe something like XML might ring a bell. That's another technology you could use to solve this problem. But JSON's kind of the one these days that gets used the most. Carolyn asks, what should you do if there's a hyphen in someone's name? Use an escape character? You're on the right track, and we're going to talk about that with JSON. We've actually got one of our exercises that talks about this exact problem. So JSON is sort of like a stripped down version of JavaScript. That is a version that you can format into a string, and you can serialize it into a string. So you can send it kind of in like a body of an HTTP request. You can write it to a file. It's meant for being sent between two systems. It's not really meant as like a code language. It's meant as like a data transport language. But it's very reminiscent of JavaScript. And the name JavaScript Object Notation would kind of follow. Here's kind of a first example of what JSON looks like. And you have kind of a lot of the same features of JavaScript. You've got objects, you've got arrays, you've got strings, you've got numbers. But let's break this down into some pieces that maybe are a little bit more scientific. So there are three kind of main data types in JSON: objects, arrays, and what are called primitives. An object is just a lot like a JavaScript object. So it's an unordered set of name value pairs. It begins with the left brace and ends with the right brace. Each name is followed by a colon, and then the values right after that colon, and they're separated by commas. So very similar to a JavaScript object. Now, the one thing that's really worth pointing out is in JSON, all keys and objects must be quoted. So in JavaScript, this would be totally valid. In JSON, this is not valid. You need to always put quotes around your keys. Now, in JavaScript, you can also put quotes around your keys. They're just often omitted for brevity. And Carolyn asked double or single quotes. Very good question. Double quotes. That's another thing. JavaScript allows you to use single or double quotes around any sort of string or any sort of identifier that would be quoted. JSON is very strict. It requires you to use double quotes, quote your keys. And if you've learned about it, I don't know if you have, so if you don't know what this means, don't worry about it. You can't have any trailing commas in any objects or any arrays. Speaking of arrays, so an array is an ordered collection of values, excuse me. An array begins with the left bracket, ends with a right bracket, and values are separated by a comma. Arrays look a lot like they do in JavaScript. And for all intents and purposes, you can think of them as the exact same. Same syntax, same formatting, pretty much the same. Primitives. So primitives, or they're often just referred to as values. A value can be a string in double quotes, a number, true or false, or null, and nothing else. So let me say that one more time. A string in double quotes, a number, true or false, or null. So what does that mean? Well, you can't do things like math in JSON. You can't concatenate two strings together. You can't add two numbers together. You can't put things that aren't any of those values in there. You can't put like a regular expression in JSON. And you can't use single quotes. So I'm going to say it one more time. This is a really important thing. Only these values are allowed in JSON. So just like in JavaScript, you can nest these sorts of data structures as deep as you'd like to go. So in JavaScript, maybe you might have an object with some keys and values, and one of the values might be an array, and that might have some numbers in it. And a lot of the power of JSON comes from the fact that you can nest arrays and objects in whatever sort of format you'd like. So in the example of our users list, that would probably most naturally be represented as an array of objects. But maybe you have like a, I don't know, like a list, a user has like a list of favorite foods. That would be maybe a case where you want to have an array then nested within each of those objects. You'd have an array with objects in it with like another array and mapped to one of the values inside of that object. You could basically, you can go as infinitely deep as you'd like to go. And it's for the most part, anytime I've needed to represent a data structure, I've been able to do it in JSON. The combination of arrays and objects and primitives works really well for representing pretty much whatever sort of data you'd like. It's a very good format for complex data. Just to really drive it home, we've got one object, we've got one array, and we've got a bunch of primitives. So does that make sense to everybody? Imagine so. It's a lot like JavaScript. Cool. Okay. Handling JSON and JavaScript. So remember, JSON and JavaScript aren't the same thing. JSON looks a lot like JavaScript, and in fact, it's actually kind of like a subset of JavaScript. But if you want to, if you receive a string containing JSON, so a string that contains like these literal characters in it, you're going to need to somehow take that and convert that into, you're going to need to convert that somehow into like the native JavaScript versions of that data. So you're going to need to be able to convert like a string containing JSON into a JavaScript object with like a key of hello and a value of world, and all that sort of stuff. Luckily, there are some really convenient functions to let you do all this. So the first one here is json.parse. And as sort of an example, this JSON global object built into the browser has a couple different functions on it. And these are this is kind of the JSON library in the browser. It's available globally. It's like set timeout. It's like window. It's all those other things. It's a global built-in to the browser. And two functions we're going to talk about as part of this are json.parse. That's the first one. So json.parse will take a string that contains some JSON, and you put it in that string, and you get out some data. So you can that data is in the native JavaScript representation. So this data is an object. You can access the hello key on it. You can print things out. To show you here, a little demo. So as for what actually data looks like, let's take a look at that. So data is itself the JavaScript representation of this JSON. Now the other way. So in this case, we took a string containing JSON and we parsed it and turned it into JavaScript. But just as often, you want to go the other way. You want to be able to take JavaScript and you want to turn it into JSON. There's a matching function called json.stringify. And that's what goes the other way. So parse goes from JSON to JavaScript. Stringify goes from JavaScript to JSON. Oh, gotta refresh. Already got that data identifier defined. There we go. So converted over. Now, something I do want to point out. Notice that there's no white space in this. Like here, when I wrote this before, I had like white space here, white space here. It turns out that in JSON, white space isn't really all that important. I mean, like in a string, if you have like a string that has some spaces in it, yeah, it's important there. But just like in the actual syntax of the JSON, it's not really all that important. And what often happens is, because we're sending this over the network, we want it to be as small as possible. The smaller number, the less bytes you have to send, the less characters you have to send, the faster the request is going to complete. So you really just want it to be as small as possible. And then those spaces are, like, they're nice for formatting, but they're kind of useless other than that. Like, they don't really convey any meaning to the computer parsing this JSON. So you often see that when tools work with JSON, they will often output them in this sort of white spaceless format. And you can, of course, take this and you can, or you could go in manually, like if you had this data and you want to look at it nicely, you could add in all your white space. But there's really no reason to include that white space when it's being sent over the network. So here's a JSON version of our original example. Oh, again, we have that defined. Oh, and so fun fact for anyone who's ends up putting code into Google Slides presentations, Google has this really pesky thing where they take every quote you type and they actually convert it into a different character. If you look at this quote and you look at this quote, they're ever so slightly different. Like if I type this, you can see it changes. Like this is like slanty and that's not slanty. That fancy quote is called a smart quote, and programming languages don't like them. So I've tried to go through the whole presentation and fix all of them, but I've missed a few. And this is a case where I've missed a few. There we go. So just imagine that you got this back in a request from the server, and you could do whatever you want with this information. So this also is worth bringing up. JSON's typically sent in the body of requests. So either, well, in the body of a request or the body of a response. That's usually where you put it, because it's sort of the payload, the information that's the request is about. But there's no reason you couldn't use it in other places. Like maybe you want to make a query string parameter where the value is some JSON. That's totally fine. It's just typically it's put in the body. And you'll see throughout the exercises we're going to do that's typically where you'll find it. So going through these same sort of problems here. In this case, I've removed that type field. And I've added back that zip field. So basically the same sort of problem we had before. And you'll see that this actually handles it. Oh, those smart quotes are back there. Well, if I get rid of the smart quotes, this handles it very nicely. Oy, lots of them in this one. Sorry, I should have noticed this beforehand. Oh, all these too. So if you're wondering why they do this whole smart quote thing, it's because Google thinks they look better. And maybe they do, but like just extra complexity. There we go. So you'll see that when I try to access this type value, it doesn't exist, so it just is undefined. So instead of it here, this is a case we can check for. We can say, like, does type exist? Is it equal to undefined? And if it is, we can do something. Or like it's not a the values didn't roll over. They didn't become things they're not supposed to become. The value's just missing, and that's a lot easier of a case to check for. So you could do something like type undefined, something like that. So something else to point out, JSON is what's called untyped. What do I mean by untyped? Well, other formats for sending data have a sort of very firm format you need to, a very firm representation you need to send the data. So maybe that means you have to include these sets of keys and these sets of values for every item. Or it means maybe you have to specify it in exactly a certain format. And the reason why they do that is if you know exactly what this format's going to look like, behind the scenes, you can sort of encode it more like I did with the first example. And you can make this even smaller in the number of bytes you have to store, the number of characters you have to send. And if that's something that really matters a lot for your sort of communication, then that's kind of a worthy trade-off to make. If the data is going to be structured in that way, then you can make it a lot smaller. The problem is often in the web development, often in development, especially in web development, things move really fast. And you might want to add a new field or update the format of something, and you might not want to worry about having to make sure that every place that reads that data has the same deserialization logic. And that's really one of the big benefits of JSON. Because it's untyped, it allows you to make changes on the fly and not have to worry about updating everywhere that reads that data or parses that data. Now, of course, the trade-off there is you can do things like remove fields and now they're going to be undefined. I mean, it's not going to break in a way that's unrecoverable. Like it's in a case you can check for it being undefined, but you can't make a guarantee in the data you're parsing that like this is always going to exist, or that like someone has set the zip code to a number. Someone could have set the zip code to like true. And that could be a problem for your app. Like maybe you're showing that zip code somewhere and a user complains, wait, it says my zip code's true. What the heck's going on? So there are pros and cons. In general, though, for web development, JSON is a really good format because the pros and cons kind of fit very nicely with generally how web applications are developed. So kind of an example of this here, like you could totally have a string there. And if you want, let's say you were adding all these numbers together and you try to add 1 plus string here plus 3, you're going to get a string that starts with 1 and ends with 3 with string here in the middle. So it could be a problem. So I went through that pretty quickly. And that was kind of on purpose because these exercises are kind of involved. And I wanted to give a lot of time to talk about them, to work on them. These are probably the longest exercises we've had. So I want to give you folks a chance to really start and hopefully get most of them done in class. So that's kind of the reason why this was somewhat short. But the other reason why is there were a lot of questions that came out of the headers thing yesterday. I kind of reading a bunch of the feedback. It seems like probably about half the class got it and didn't have any problems with it. And the other half was like really, really lost. So my hope is that the half that's really, really lost, we can use the time kind of to go through things, to answer questions. There are definitely some things I could have explained better yesterday. So hopefully we can rehash a bit of that and make sure you can understand those concepts. So does that make sense to everyone? Cool. One last thing. So I've taken a little bit of a different format with the exercises this time. I've added in this optional next step section in each of the exercises. And here's kind of my thought here. So there's been this sort of constant tension in the background where a number of students have been like, kind of been asking for more, have been wanting me to like go faster. And other students kind of are really satisfied at the pace we're going or have been wanting me to even go a little bit slower. So I'm hoping with these optional next steps for students that are kind of just barely hanging on or like really need to spend some time figuring this stuff out, really the only requirement is going to be to just do the regular exercise. But if you're finding you can get through the regular exercise fine and you have no problems, do the optional next steps. They're a little bit more challenging. They're going to require you doing some research online, but the optional next steps really match a lot towards what like a real developer would be doing in day-to-day work. So that's so again, optional next steps, they're optional. They are not required. If you don't do them, it's fine. But if you feel up to it, go for it. So yes, Kelly posted the assignment in chat. I'm going to post it also in Slack, or maybe Kelly posted it there already too. Nope. Okay. Very nice.
Hey, so I wanted to jump in for a second, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go for it.
Cool. So I also read in the feedback that some people really like real life examples when it comes to tech terms. I don't blame them. I'm one of those people too. So I found this one online for JSON, and I'm going to read it because I didn't write it. But so if you think of JSON, you can think of it kind of like a delivery truck. Like the data type is just all the kinds of goods that you have. So when you want to transport goods from one place to another, you load them in the truck first, transport them to the destination, and then unload them. So that like when you load them onto the truck, that's your JSON.stringify. Then when you transport them, that's sending them to the server. And when you unload them, it's like the JSON.parse. So that kind of helped me to conceptualize what you're doing with JSON.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy. Thank you for that. So Susan asked, and JSON is specifically for transporting JavaScript data, correct? Traditionally, yes, but it's actually turned into just a format that pretty much every programming language has a library to parse. So it originally started out as a purely sort of browser or web thing, but now it's pretty much used as like the de facto transport format for pretty much like all data, definitely all data on the web. I might even go as far as to say like in computing, it's like becoming that much of a standard. If the programming language you're working in doesn't have a JSON library, then I would be shocked. Like it's that ubiquitous.
Brielle asked a good question, so I want to bring it up. She asked, so does JSON also store data in the back end or just transport?
Very good question. Traditionally, just transport. However, though, you can use it to store data as well on the back end. You're gonna talk about it in server module, but you can actually make entries in a database where like a field in the database is a JSON field. So there, and that has pros and cons. But yeah, I mean, definitely is used for data storage as well. At least in this module, though, we're just going to use it for transport. So Carolyn asks, you're using the JavaScript console in the web browser dev tools, correct? Yep, you are. Carolyn asks that native JSON tools equal primitives. By native JSON tools. So the first exercise is in the JavaScript console, convert the string into a JavaScript object using the native JSON tools in the browser. I guess what I mean by that is the JavaScript libraries and the way you would interact with JavaScript in the browser. So things like json.parse, json.stringify, the tools you have in a browser context to work with JSON. That make sense? So Shah says it returns undefined. What returns undefined? Yes, you may be right that something is returning undefined. I just don't know what you're referring to.
Shah said running it in the console in the chat. Not sure if you saw it.
Yeah, I don't know what it is still. Yeah, Shah, if you could post what you have in student pasted code, I'll take a look.
Yes, sure. Thanks.
Yep.
Brian, I had a quick question.
Yeah.
Looking at your slide on the Json Parse, are those single quotes or backticks? They look like they're backticks.
Yeah, have you folks learned about backtick strings yet?
Yes.
Okay, yes, they are backticks because it's a multi-line
Okay.
string.
When I copied and pasted it, it turned them into single quotes.
They might be like smart backticks or something.
Okay. Thank
Yeah,
you.
replace them with backticks and it should be good. So Carolyn says, so we need to parse exercise 1. I'm gonna leave that up to each individual person to figure that out. But that seems like a possible good direction. Sorry for not giving you an answer there. Okay, let's talk about it then. So JSON.stringify and JSON.parse are 2 methods. JSON.stringify takes JavaScript and converts it into JSON. JSON.parse takes JSON and converts it into JavaScript. So for the first exercise, you want to convert a string, the string that contains JSON into JavaScript. So string into JavaScript is JSON.parse. Yeah, you're right. Does that make sense?
There's a lot of stuff in that string.
Oh yeah, and that's
Like
just
trying to figure out how to, I don't have to take it apart. I have to use a tool that will help me.
exactly. Yeah.
Oh, you're so tricky. Okay.
Also, I just want to point out that's actually not all that big of a JSON script.
Well, yeah, but you're talking to a beginner here.
Yeah, I'm just
So,
to give you context.
yeah, got it.
I'll post it in the student pasted code if you want to go check over there, Ryan.
Yep.
Cool.
Oh, okay. There's a way to nest. Object. So this whole thing contains the object from over this world. And the array contains text equals instead of const text parse text. Oh, see what's. Okay, white space doesn't matter. Oh, I just realized my mute wasn't on. Sorry. For the first exercise, Ryan.
Mhm.
You have let JSON string equal to. Can we lose those two spaces around the equal since white space isn't as important in JSON, or?
You're saying the first exercise?
Yeah,
What part are you working on?
I'm just trying to wrap my head around how I'm going to dive into it, but I'm noticing there's some white space that maybe we don't need, and I was just curious about that, like around the equal after string.
Oh, yeah. So when I said that you don't need to have white space in JSON, what I meant by that is that the contents of the string itself doesn't need to have any white space in it. But
Oh, so dropping down lines with the soft returns kind of thing.
yeah, either returns or just like spaces after the colon of like a of the key. Just like any sort of if you look at that JSON on the first example, I think I've gotten all the white space out of it. That's about as compressed as it can get.
Okay, I was
Um,
just, yeah,
but
okay.
and to answer your question, the spaces around the equal, you could get rid of those if you wanted to, but like that's JavaScript. That's not the JSON. The JSON itself is contained all within the string.
Yeah, okay. So that's basically the statement I'm starting with, and then I take it from there to, okay.
Yep, exactly.
When I first looked at it, I thought I had to like physically go and say, pull this out, this goes here, pull that out, and like manually turn it into,
Oh no.
which is like gonna send me into hitting my head on the wall. All right, thank you.
Yep, no. So Carolyn asked, is JSON.parse treated as a function? Yeah, JSON.parse is a function. And the way you can tell that is if you run just JSON.parse in the JavaScript console and hit enter, you'll see that the type it prints out, it's a function. Carolyn asked, are we dealing with prompts in these exercises? Not for the first 3. For the last 2, you will. So sorry, but they're going to keep coming up. There's no way to escape them.
No, I'm just kind of in a promise mindset. So like I'm ready to roll with all the stuff you do to get the server to, it's like, okay, cool your jets. This isn't one of those.
Cool. Actually, more accurately, you could do exercise 4 outside of the browser. So exercise 4 maybe, but 5 you definitely will need it. Need to use them.
Ryan, I don't want to like get in the way of what other people are figuring out, but if I could screen share or something,
Sure. Yeah.
is that okay?
Yep. Go for it.
There you go.
Okay. Got your string there. Yes. So you're really you're thinking kind of in the promised way of thinking here, but that's not what you want to do for this. JSON.parse is a synchronous function. But JSON.parse is going to return the data that has been parsed.
Oh, you just told me. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yep.
Cool. Yeah, back to the good old days. All right. Thank you.
Yep.
So I'd like to do a quick check-in. Can we get some yeses and nos in the chat? Have people finished exercise 1?
Kyle, most likely what's going on is parse, or wait, you're trying to stringify something that is already a JavaScript. I think I got that right. No, you're trying to
Parse.
parse. Yeah, you're trying to parse something that is JavaScript. Yeah.
So
That's
how,
what-
so the browser decided it was JavaScript based on what was typed in, or
So I'm guessing you took your JSON and you just pasted it in. You didn't put quotes around it. Because JSON is kind of like a subset of JavaScript, most of the time when you paste JSON into a JavaScript console, it's going to evaluate it as JavaScript.
I typed it. I didn't paste anything, but let me look at, maybe
But-
I'm misunderstanding the exercise.
No, but you probably typed it, but you didn't put quotes around the JSON. That's really important. JSON is going to go into a string.
Around the entire object?
Yes, around the entire JSON. The
Oh,
entire, and the reason why is because JSON is meant to be serialized. And when you deserialize it, you then turn it into JavaScript representation.
okay, thank you. I was referring to the slides and I don't think I noticed that in there, but
Yeah, I didn't mention that detail, but I probably should. Well, I guess I did, but not directly. I probably should have.
I may have been looking at the wrong slide too. It's okay. Thank you. I'll try it that way.
Yep. Carolyn, you said you wanted some more assistance with exercise 1. What's going on?
Well, I'm trying different permutations and it's still not happy. Let me try one more thing and see if it works. I'm almost there. 1 second. Nope. Okay. May I screen share?
Yeah, go for it. Kyle, just to answer your question, do I need to put let in the variable in the quotes too? No, you don't. So only the JSON data itself goes in the quotes. So let's say you've got like a JSON object, the quotes would go around like the outer curly brace of that JSON object.
You can see all the,
Yeah. So
I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I guess I don't completely understand.
Carolyn, you're thinking way too asynchronous here. JSON.parse returns a value. So what you really want to do is something like maybe like let data equals JSON.parse JSON string. Give that a try. I think you're overthinking this.
Whoops, want to type there? Come on. Oh, is that screen share?
Yep. Yeah, I can see what you're
Oh, no,
typing.
it's all right. I thought it just wasn't going to type.
Nope, not quotes around it. Just JSON.parse. JSON.parse is a function built into the web browser. No curly braces at the end. Just in the parentheses in the function, just put a JSON string. So you're just calling a function called JSON.parse. We're giving it a parameter of JSON string, and it's returning data. Just a regular synchronous function call. Nothing fancy. Just like you've been doing all throughout the JavaScript module. Yep, you're good.
And JSON parse, that has to all be uppercase, right? The JSON?
It does, yeah.
All right. So, so if I were to do this again, I would start with let JSON string equal with that whole thing.
Mhm.
And then do this step.
Yep, exactly. And then lastly, you're just going to log out data. So just console.log data. Just hit enter.
Oh, yeah.
As a line after that, put or yeah, that works too. Console.log data.
So not return then, because
No,
it does return.
There's no return. There's no callback involved here at all.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you're overthinking this a little bit here. Like it's just a function that you're calling. It's returning data. That's it.
And I can just go ahead and hit return then.
Yep. You're good. You're good. Yeah.
And that's
there we go.
all we do with that?
Yeah, you see it says menu there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's your JavaScript object.
Oh, great. I see it. Okay, so I'll just have to do that again and take a screenshot. And I lost a couple other screenshots from the other assignment, but all right.
Yeah.
Now on to 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6.
Yeah, something like that.
You're gonna be up all night by any chance? I'm kidding. Oh man, this stuff, it's like not in here. All right, thank you, Ryan.
Yep, no problem. I will say, I didn't think I didn't think people would be having problems writing synchronous code and doing asynchronous stuff with it. Typically, the problem's the other way around. So I mean, it's a good problem to have, I would say.
I think it's how my brain must be wired. It's kind of scary. Maybe I'm destined to do async, who knows?
I'm stuck on exercise 3. Would you rather I share my screen or put it in the pasted code channel or?
Either works.
Okay.
Ah, yes. So, have you folks talked about putting quotes inside of strings yet? How you do that? Does the word like \escape, does that mean anything?
Yes, I remember that now. Yeah, right. If you have one kind of quote, you have to use a different kind of quotes.
Yep.
Right. Okay. I thought we had to use double quotes for everything on this though.
You have to use double quotes for everything inside of the JSONs. Like all the keys have to be quoted in double quotes, but you can put the JSON string in whatever kind of quotes you want.
Okay. All right. Thank
Or,
you.
alternatively, you can still put them in double quotes and just escape every pair of double quotes inside of the string. There are certain situations where one is better than the other, but and just maybe to mention it, sometimes you have to you have a JSON string embedded within more JSON, and you actually have 3 levels of quote escaping to worry about. So it can turn into a real nuts problem really fast. So Kelly just reminded me we should probably be taking a break here pretty soon. I'm gonna say maybe let's take a break now until 7. Does that work for everyone? Cool. Okay. See you soon. So just a quick check in here. Would everyone be able to put the exercise they're currently on in the chat? Just want to see how people are doing with these. Cool. Thanks, folks.
Hey, Ryan,
Yeah,
can I screen share, please?
yeah, go for it.
Thank you. All right, I'm working on the bonus part of the first exercise.
Mhm.
And I'm hitting a wall again.
Token colon and JSON. Ah, yes. So this is a case where you're going to want to look very carefully at your JSON and kind of go character by character and figure out what's going wrong. I'm gonna so because you inserted some data in here, you kind of know that the error is probably around where you inserted the data.
Yeah, and I found a bunch of little things which are big things to a computer that I corrected, and I didn't type this in here. I did copy that from my text file.
Okay. Well, I'll say it looks very good. I only think there's one issue remaining. And take a look at the between the objects with the save object and the close object.
Oh, you have such a good eye. Yeah, that's,
I'll tell you, you become really good at picking this stuff out after you spend
Oh, yeah.
hours and hours
Yeah.
staring at
I mean,
JSON.
yeah, I mean, I'm used to working with detail and everything. It's just that this is not, but my eyes, are totally used to yet.
Yep.
That should do it then. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But you
All right.
actually, you made me
And-
realize. Oh, go ahead.
As of the other question too, can I just do the let statement by itself, hit return and get undefined, and then do the let data, or like the second example where I did it all in one?
You can do it. You can enter each line individually. You can do it all in one. Does the exact same thing.
Okay. And the reason it was undefined is because it was JSON.
Yeah. So the reason why it's undefined is when you assign a variable. JavaScript's a little bit weird in that assigning the variable is actually an expression and it evaluates the undefined. So what you're seeing there is you're seeing the result of evaluating the assignment to the variable. In fact, it just means that like that expression didn't return anything, so it's good. It's a little bit confusing though.
Yeah.
Yeah,
This stuff's very cerebral.
indeed.
Like I feel like there's pieces missing. You give us a certain thing, and then we have to figure out what the pieces are. And when you do figure out the pieces, it's like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's just trying to get there.
I'll let you know that is completely purposeful, and the reason why
Yes.
I've structured the class like that is that's how it actually works in the real world.
Oh yeah, no, I totally get it.
Yeah.
It's just a different mental exercise than I've had to do in years.
Yeah.
At my age. So yeah. All right, let's see if that works, shall we?
Yeah, go for it.
I bet it will. Thank you.
Yep. So Carolyn reminded me there's actually a tool I use with JSON all the time. I want to show you folks. I think you're gonna like it. What it basically does is if I go it's a website, jsonprettyprint.net. I use it so much I type J and it just auto completes in my web browser. You can put whatever JSON you want in this box. So I'll just do something like this here. You can click JSON pretty print and it'll print it out all nice for you. So I use this when I get data back from a server and it's like super compressed and I can't read it. And take a look at this and nicely formats it for me. Anyone who's done the exercise has gone through most of them has probably figured out there's a way you can do this with the JavaScript functions too. But this is kind of nice. It's just a web interface. So jsonprettyprint.net, quite handy. There's a lot of similar tools. If you Google JSON pretty print, there's like 50 of them because it's like a super easy thing for people to write. But yeah. So Susan said, I have the first two parts of number 5 done, but I can't do the last. Let's see.
Yeah.
First two parts. So you made a request to the number list endpoint. you've gotten the data out of it, but are you, I guess, is the problem you're having, you're trying to add them up and you're not having success with that?
Yeah, my problem is the writing the response as a callback or however you phrased it there. Like, I don't know exactly how to do it. And I went back through the slides and I don't see how to do it. I mean, I see the data, I guess.
Yeah, so
I don't know. Like, I don't know I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing here, basically.
okay. I would suggest when you get a chance, if you weren't at the office hours this weekend, go through and watch that video.
Okay.
I did an explanation on promises that went over pretty well with everyone who was there. And I think that's definitely going to be helpful for you. But in the meantime, let me send you a slide that has pretty much like a verbatim example of how you would make a request to the Axios and get the response in the promise.
Okay.
You know, I had one over here somewhere. I put that link in student pasted code if anyone is also having trouble writing the request. So I know a lot of people last time we checked in were on module or on the fifth exercise. If anyone's finished that up and is kind of just sitting on their hands now, kind of looking for the next thing to work on, I do have, we've got this sort of end project for this module that I kind of wanted to start to introduce now so that anyone who maybe is wants to kind of start working on that can get onto that. This is kind of going to be the weekend project for this upcoming weekend to figure this out. But it's a big enough task where like it wouldn't be a bad idea to get started on it now. And I haven't really introduced it up until now because you need to understand JSON for it to make sense. So I'm going to post 2 links in the chat and also in Slack. And don't worry if you're not ready to get started on this yet. But I know a bunch of people were on the fifth exercise, and I want to give them something else to think about. So there is the final exercise, and the link to what it looks like, just to see what the final result of it would be, is this. Now that the weekend project this upcoming weekend, that New York Times bestsellers final exercise, it's going to require a decent amount of research and investigation. You're going to be using an API provided by the New York Times, not one I've written. So your first time interfacing with a real service, like with real data, not just kind of contrived stuff I came up with. So it's kind of exciting, but it means you're going to have to learn about that and read some documentation. And yeah, but I'm mentioning it now because if you have questions, you can feel free to contact Kelly or me during the week. So, and that'll I'll put an exercise up for that later in the week, so you can submit it once it's good. How's everybody doing? I will say, watching everybody's videos, I'm seeing a lot of like shaking heads and like weird faces, and so I'm guessing maybe some folks have some questions.
Well, we're supposed to have the grit and the temperament, but right now it's like I'm so close, then I hit return, and it's an error. It's like, ah! I want to fix it. So it's fun, but it's hard.
Fair enough. Also, for anyone who's stuck or like working on exercise 5 still, like realize that is the most complicated one out of all of them, and like it's totally fine if it's going to take you a little bit. I will say though, that is one of the more realistic examples of something you would actually do in a web application. So it's a good test case.
I forget how to save the chat. Do you remember?
It looks like a little dot 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 in the lower right hand corner you can click on, like, and you can go up to save chat.
Lower right hand corner of the Zoom
chat window.
screen, the chat window. Oh, there it is, next to file. Thank you. I couldn't remember. Thank you.
So Kyle, I don't know if you're just posting as a status update or you want some help with it, but oh, you're muted.
I'm gonna keep trying for a little bit longer.
Okay.
Okay, I think I figured out what I'm doing wrong, but if I simplify it, I've got like an extra function, but if I take that function out of there, I can't figure out where to console log the sum because I've got a scope problem. Can I share my screen?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So that's what I initially did. I wrote this function in VS Code and then I put it in there. Then I realized I've got this extra function here that I don't really need anymore. So then I tried to take it out, but now I don't know where to console log to
Yeah.
function basically and console log it.
Okay.
If I put it right under here, under the return, then it's going to do it every time, like for the whole loop. Right?
Yeah. So there's a couple things here. First of all, can you go up to your top example before you?
Yeah.
So did this work for you? Out of curiosity.
It works in VS Code. Like if I comment all this out, I have all this above, like in VS Code. I just put the I took the array that I got back from the promise, or yeah, from the promise, and pasted it in VS Code and gave it a variable name, and that works.
But if you take like from line 27 to line 37, copy that in your clipboard and paste it in the JavaScript console, does that work?
No, that's when I was getting back 0.
Can you run it for me? I just want to see what happens when you do it.
Run the JavaScript console?
Yeah. Reproduce the 0 you were saying you're getting. Because I believe you it's happening, but I don't see just looking at it what the problem is. And I think if you do it.
I don't really need, like, that's what it did.
Okay. Wait, so if you paste it, it doesn't, like, it's all compressed like that? Like there's no new lines or spaces or anything in it?
No, well, I wrote it with all the nice spaces in VS Code and the new lines, and then I think I thought every time you do this in the console, like when you hit return, it sends it. So I was trying to do it like like that, and then I pasted it back into VS Code so I could make it so I could understand it and figure out the problem.
So my guess is when you compressed it, you accidentally changed what it did. Like you accidentally like somehow altered it in some way. I don't know exactly what you did, but
well, I should have the 2 functions. I was doing that right.
That's so. I will say that is definitely one way to do it.
Okay.
Looking at your code, that the reason why I gravitated to the top one is I think that should pretty much just work. The bottom one you can get to work, but there's a couple adjustments you need to make.
Okay. So I guess my basic question is, how do I guess I'm not using the console right. I thought every time you hit enter on this console, it was going to send your code to the.
Yeah, it will, but there's so if you in the upper left-hand corner of DevTools, there's like 4 icons, and there's a circle with a slash through it.
I mean, upper left-hand corner circle. Yes.
Yep. Click on that. Okay. Now in the JavaScript console, just paste. I think just like Command V or right click, go to paste.
No.
Oh, okay. I mean, I guess I'm
the whole. Let's see, back to VS Code. All right. Let's see, I want this one.
Yep.
Okay. Copy. Okay. So that's how you would do it. You would just write it in something else and paste it in.
So that's one way. Alternatively, if you hold down Shift and press Enter.
Aha, that's a good trick. All right, so you want me to just run this now?
Yep, hit Enter. Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Still get 0. Interesting.
I've messed something up.
Okay, let me look at this a little closer here. Over index, listen. I mean, conceptually, you're doing the right thing here. Try this. Stick a console.log inside of the for loop and log out like
Yeah, right.
total.
I have to paste the whole thing again. And then
Yeah.
all right.
above, yeah, click where you are right now, like above that line, put like console.log total. No, you gotta hit shift enter.
All right, let's try this again. No, what did I do? Okay, no, that's right. I just, wait a minute, can I,
Or do it in VS Code and
I'm gonna
copy it.
start over.
Yeah, that might be
All
easier.
right. Now I need to hit shift enter. And
Yeah. It can be a little bit awkward to try to edit this sort of stuff in the console. That's for sure.
yeah, okay. All right. What did you want me to do here?
Like console.log total or something like that. I just want to see if it's increasing on every loop iteration. It should be, but maybe it isn't. And that would at least say something.
Do you need me to open the promise?
Oh, I know what it is. Okay. What do you, so total array, your function, it takes in response. And you loop over and you get the number in the response.
Uh-huh.
Log out response inside of the promise.then.
Wait a minute.
Take a look at what that is, and then think about what you're doing to that value response.
All right, so inside the loop, you mean? Instead of
Like inside, like on the between the second and third line of what you have there, like inside of the promise.then, do something like console.log response.
Okay.
Just log out the whole response and take a look at what that data looks like.
So just, I could just put it here without doing a new line, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And take a look at the type of data you're getting back when what gets logged out.
Oh, okay.
Do you see what you need to
So I
do?
need to do dot data.
Yep, exactly.
Oh, okay, thank you.
And I bet if you update that, it'll work perfectly fine.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, no problem. Out of curiosity, has anyone taken a look at the New York Times thing yet? If the answer is no, that's fine, but just curious.
I'm still stuck. Can I share again? It wasn't like the dot that I put in. Um, it doesn't like the dot after the
Yeah. So
here.
there's
And
two places you have response. You're specifying it as a parameter to total array and also as the name of the argument, or you were specifying it as the name of the argument in the function total array. So
right, because I have to in order to.
yep,
Maybe there's a better way to put it through there, though. If you
exactly. So the problem is when you specify a list of parameters in a function,
Mhm.
those have to be just identifiers. So A through Z, uppercase A through Z, lowercase A through Z, 0 through 9, underscore, and $sign. So they have to just be those sort of identifiers.
Oh, okay. All right.
Can't doing something like response.data, that's not something valid you can put in that location.
Okay. And it doesn't work without it because I tried taking it out and it gets 0 again. So I'm pretty sure.
You, if you get rid of the dot data, that dot data, and hit enter, do you think that's gonna work?
No, because it didn't. I tried it already.
Huh. Why doesn't that work? Oh, yeah, because on that I'm just gonna tell you because you're so close here. On that for line, response.length, that should really be response.data.length.
Oh, okay.
I bet if you make that adjustment.
How does it know that it's the length of the data, though?
Because data is an array. It's a JSON array that's been decoded.
Right, but if this were an array in a different context, you would still need to tell it that you want it to look at the length, not just the array.
Oh, I mean, not you want to make it response.data.length.
Oh, okay. Oh, you could chain 2 of them. Okay.
Yeah, you can change them as far as you want.
All right, so let's see. Let me take this out of here again and aha.
There we
Yes,
go.
thank you. Thank you so much.
Yep. Carolyn, I'm seeing your emotive behavior, and it's making me laugh.
I'm saying, yes, 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 I finally got number 2. So it didn't give me an error and I figured it out and I know why. And it's just,
Good.
you need to talk to Max about the whole, and Gus about the whole JavaScript module and how it's just, I know, but I just, a lot of it did this because I was sick for some of it and I'm still trying to like, so
Yeah,
then
I mean,
doing this, it's like,
to teach you all that in 4 weeks is absurd.
it's
Like
insane.
that's like at least 3 months worth of stuff. Like if you're just learning it on your own, like at
Oh
least.
yeah, it's insane. But I just, I mean, like what we're doing now builds on that. And if you feel tenuous with that, it gets,
Yep.
like I
And
still owe homework assignments from the module because I couldn't do this. So it's like, if I can sit here and go, oh yeah, or I can look, on the MD site, whatever it is, or, WCC and get, it's like, but I caught myself, I said, I'm still thinking asynchronously. That's what I'm doing wrong with this example too. Where it's like I caught myself.
yeah. Well,
But it's like, oh my God.
just so you
I
know,
don't
like
think I want to do troubleshooting errors for the most of my life.
this sort of building concept you're talking about, that just keeps on going. Like not
yeah.
just through careers in code, like that's just how software is.
It's
Like
life.
there's onion skin layers of complexity.
Oh, yeah.
And it's all about yeah, like
Yeah.
programmers
life.
love making abstractions. Yeah.
But that's what you've seen me a few times going, oh, shoot, because I thought it was so close. Oh, darn. And then it's like, oh, I did figure it out. Yay. Sorry. I kind of did that for your benefit, actually. You and Kelly. She's being so quiet. Anyway, moving on.
So we are at 8:30 here. If people want to stick on a bit longer, more than willing to do that, but don't feel like you have to. If you've got the exercises done and you want to get started on the New York Times thing, go for it. Otherwise, that's going to be the weekend project for this upcoming weekend. So you're just getting rid of work for yourself in the future, if so. But that's it. Tomorrow we have got a big day ahead of us, so get ready for it. doesn't sound like we'll be tossing confetti. I mean, you might kind of be like it's gonna be you're gonna be learning something pretty cool tomorrow. Like how these sorts of web services get organized and laid out. Yeah, it's gonna be good.
Are you bringing the popcorn, Ryan, and Kelly's bringing the soda?
No, everyone's bringing their own popcorn and soda.
Oh, I thought virtually if we could maybe FTP it or something.
Okay, so because you mentioned that and this came to mind, I gotta bring it up. So
Uh-oh.
programmers, they like to be all like funny and coy and stuff. And when the HTTP specification was being created, they decided that they wanted to make a status code that was kind of a joke. So I gotta look up exactly what it is. I forget what the name, what number it is. 418. Yeah. So there was this RFC, this sort of like document that was put out about it was like I think the HTTP coffee protocol or some stupid thing like that. And the idea was that like it was how you control a coffee maker, I think, over HTTP. So it talked about like a standard way of like setting up all the endpoints to do it. Like there was like a brew call you could make that was like something like that. And what happened is they needed an error case when you made these requests to a teapot and not a coffee maker. So they invented this status code called 418. I'm a teapot, and it seriously is part of the specification and is still around today. And like you look up anywhere, like the HTTP status code 418 is I'm a teapot. It is like a complete joke, but
Okay, everybody, I'm a little teapot, short and stout. Unbelievable. Programmers are silly.
yeah, if you look up HTTP status code 418 I'm a teapot, or just look up like I'm a teapot RFC. I'll post a link in the thing. You can read all about it.
Programmers are brilliant, interesting people with really crazy and wild sense of humor. You gotta have it. Gotta.
Yeah, the hypertext coffee pot control protocol, HTCP. Oh my gosh.
That's almost as bad as the acronyms in the library and information profession and some of the humorous little, things. Like if you're interested in Library of Congress classification, check out what BS is. Just somebody with a sense of humor designated BS for a particular subject. It's just kind of silly, but pretty funny. You figure it out. If you go to an academic library, you'll see it.
Okay, I think I'm probably gonna have to get going. I'm starting to get pretty hungry and I didn't eat any dinner. So that's gotta be taken care of here. But good seeing all you folks, and we'll get ready to talk about REST tomorrow, which is gonna be very fun. So